if we build winning behavior into ourselves and our teams, then we can attach that to any product.
Whatever. Yeah.
We can pull any lever, right? We can undergo any change. We can undergo any transformation. We can do it by paper. We can do it by iPad, right? Those just happen to be next to me. That wasn't planned.
Yep.
Like we can do it. We can do anything when we have the behavior that produces results. The problem and the challenge is that behavior is the most complex variable in the world. Like there is nothing more complex than one person's behavior, let alone the group dynamics when we start putting 2, 5, 10, 20, 100, 30,000 people together in, when businesses get really big.
Yeah.
So that's the reason we need culture. If you think it this way, what character is to a person, culture is to a team. Character is my internal set of beliefs that I live from, that feed and guide what I do, how I do it, and why I do it. That's my character.
Yeah.
If I have a weak character, it means I promote something but live another way.
Yep.
Or I promote a really shallow belief and I live really closely to, a really shallow belief, right? That's where weak character comes from. Or weak character comes from when a little bit of pressure is applied to my character breaks.
Yeah.
Right. Like I believe in honesty until all of a sudden I have to tell you a truth that may hurt your feelings, but is really, really, really important. And instead of being honest because I got afraid, I just didn't tell you the truth, which means my character was it overpromised and underdelivered.
Yeah.
Culture is that for a team and a group. It's the set of beliefs that we share together that guide and direct how we behave on the job every day and why we actually do that, what it produces for us. And so culture is beliefs, behaviors, and outcomes. And just like every person has a character, whether they've defined it or not, everybody has a character, right? They have beliefs that they live by, and those beliefs are either strong and resilient and robust, and they uphold and you can challenge them, but they stay under pressure. Or those beliefs at various different points have cracks and they fade or they crack or they crumble or whatever it is. Culture is the same way, right? Some cultures are, some cultures believe that in positivity until management makes a decision they don't like.
Yeah.
And then they get to complain a lot.
Yep.
Right. It's a weak culture in that it only takes a little bit of pressure or challenge or difficulty for it to crack. And this is important because, and this is one of the really big things in culture for people to get when you think about this pathway. And again, it's not because of the pathway exists because this is true. There is nothing that drives human behavior in a business more strongly than culture. Culture is the number one execution vehicle in the world. Because think about your own experience. Yeah, my dinner table. So I had my parents were divorced, which was one of the biggest shapers of me, right? So my dad was a pastor and my mom was not a pastor.
Okay.
And so that's probably why they didn't make it past when I was maybe about a year old or so. They were married for a while beforehand, but they divorced when I was about a year old. So at my dad's house, the house was structured. The dinner table conversation was around business, leadership, and sports.
Okay.
We at the dinner table, my dad brought home and talked leadership development and personal excellence. And he was a track star at UCLA, and he likes to talk about a lot. He was there in Wooden's last couple of years, John Wooden's last couple of years.
Oh, wow. Wow.
And so he kind of pulled this, aura away from it. Right. And then was really interested in the competitive side. So he was always talking about that stuff at the dinner table. And then he was always talking about, we were talking about just leadership and then sports. Like we were talking about, whatever it was dirt bike racing or football or, again, whatever the topic was. And we would just, he just rarely turned it off. He didn't talk about a ton of other stuff.
Yeah.
Whereas in my mom's house, the conversation was, I guess, what I would call a worldly one, right? For my dad, I learned at the dinner table, it was structure and, like standards, set guideline standards. Whereas my mom's house was less structure but it was more worldly, right? It was that street smarts talk,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
It was stuff like there's no such thing as a bad word.
Yeah.
There, whatever meaning you choose to assign to that word, right? Whereas
Yeah.
at my dad's house, it was no, there were definitely bad words,
Yeah.
right?
Interesting.
And so I had this really cool upbringing between these two homes of parents that gave me a ton of love, but they ran their homes and really kind of their views of reality differently. And so our conversations at the dinner table really shaped me in two pretty completely different ways, which I'm really grateful.
That's really interesting that there were the two different dynamics, and then where you are at today and how much. I mean, it seems like you obviously have taken a lot of what your dad was talking about and made it your life, but I'm sure that there's some influences in that from your mother as well. Do you have any thoughts on this? Was something that I absolutely love doing. I always like talking sports or leadership or anything like that. Is that kind of the reason why you went in that direction, or?
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, I have my own personal journey of separate from sports, sort of I like to think about what one of the big things that I do right now is I teach the intersection of self-awareness, self-discipline, and self-confidence. If you can be really self-aware, really self-disciplined, really self-confident, I mean, you can achieve just about damn anything you want.
Sure.
Right? But if you miss one of those, it starts getting real hard, no matter how talented you are. And I learned that first in my life, just experientially navigating between the two homes for the divorce, right? The handoff and the drives and the flights and all this time by myself and these two really different homes and the tension and all that stuff. And I had to learn how to, I think people talk cope and they think negative way, but I think of it really in like the positive way, right? I had to learn how to adjust myself and gain control of myself to get some stability. In terms of the actual work now, obviously my dad, a huge shaping hand, we worked together for 15 years, but to a large extent, I'd also say like, my mom, while not in the, what I would call direct professional sense that my dad has played, my mom, super competitive.
Oh yeah.
Like, I mean, wild competitive and, high standards. And despite the fact that I would say probably her, the structure, at least compared to my dad, wasn't quite the same. Like the standards were also her standards were her standards. And so I learned standards and establishing them and holding to them.
Yeah.
Really, really strongly from both of my parents, and then my mom, probably more so than my dad, was just wired with a heart for helping people. Like she's just wired for this, give. And then it's not my dad isn't just, it was just give. And so, and she's still that way.
Yeah.
And so, I feel like I kind of pulled both of those things together. And I kind of took all this, incredible stuff from my mom, all this, incredible stuff from my dad, and then went through my own life experiences of this, right? Yeah. And business experiences of that, and try to figure out how to not be my mom, not be my dad, but pull so many of the things that they taught me, and then try to figure out who am I,
what's right,
what can I go do with that?
Yeah, absolutely. So you mentioned too your sort of ebbs and flows that you've been through. What types of businesses have you been involved in? What were some of those earlier influences that have led you to where you are today?
Yeah, so like most entrepreneurs, I was not a great college student. I did fine in high school, 3.85, whatever it was. And when I played football in college, and it wasn't that I wasn't capable of being a student. I wasn't interested.
Right.
I just, and again, I think some people will identify with this. I just never cared about the difference between an A and a C.
Yeah.
It just didn't mean anything to me.
Yeah.
Looking back now at almost 40, the skills maybe that I could have built are interesting. The opportunity to study freely and all that stuff is interesting now, but I still don't care about an A or a C. Like,
yeah, exactly.
It wasn't until after I got out of college, I was like, oh, like this could make me $1,000. This skill could make me 10 grand. Yeah. That's a meaningful difference. Right.
Yeah. Right.
So my, my ebbs and flows, I didn't realize what I wanted to do. Well, I shouldn't say didn't realize until I realized I wanted to coach coaches when I was in college. My experience as a college athlete was I just recognized that coaches didn't get a lot of coaching, if any. In fact, the most undercoached profession in America, in my observation. And so I said, well, hey, I can teach that. Like we can teach the skills of building and running a team, the skills of, mental development, the competitive side for athletes, and help them learn how to build culture. So that's what I wanted to do. At the very last second, right before graduation, a friend in Southern California, and I went to college in Ohio, out in Worcester, and it's the middle of nowhere in Amish country. I mean, it was like, it was bleak. Loved my time. It was bleak. And a friend back in my hometown on the beach in LA said, hey, I've got an extra room. Come out, like, come live with me. Like, let's go. He's like, I don't, you don't have to pay a thing. We're good. So the very last second, right before I was getting ready to start the business, I said, I can do that anytime. And I moved out to LA.
Okay.
Got a job doing IT recruiting for web and mobile development in Westwood, right on the corner of UCLA's campus. I was living in Manhattan Beach, commuting to Westwood. It's about a 19-minute drive, takes about an hour and 20 minutes, hour and a half. And I realized within 30 days that I was living in paradise and I hated my existence.
Yeah.
Because it was the first time in my life that I was begging for Fridays and dreading Mondays.
Yeah.
I hated it.
Yeah.
And it was a wake-up call that if I wasn't able to pour myself into the work, and I don't mean follow my passion, maybe we can come back to that because Mike Rowe has a really great comment that he makes about this that really shifted me when I heard it. But it wasn't about following my passion. It was about I dreaded the entire existence. I dreaded the drive. I dreaded going to the office. I just all of that. And so I made a decision. I was like, I'm out. I'm not doing this. But I forced myself to perform in the job before I left.
Okay.
I wasn't able to because I was going to quit the job. But I wasn't going to quit until I hit my number.
Okay.
And so I had to stay in the job, self-imposed,
Yep.
until I hit my number, just to say that I didn't back out because it was hard work.
Yeah. Right.
Hit my number, moved back to Ohio and started a business building leadership culture and behavior skills for coaches, what I do now, or at least one of the audiences. And my first year in business, I got 0 second meetings, earned 0 clients, and made $0 in a year.
Okay.
Reason number one is I wasn't good enough. Reason number two is that it was early. Coaches didn't do that. Sports teams didn't do that stuff yet.
Yep.
And then reason number three is coaches are and still are a real stubborn bunch to work with because they have so much control over everything.
Yeah.
That letting somebody coach them that way is still a really new notion for a lot of these guys, men and women.
Yep.
So my first 2 years or so out of college was really a blazing success.
Yeah.
And sarcasm. And then I only had two things. I was never going to work with my dad, and I was never going to work in business. Yeah. And but I started looking at all the different options. I started looking at stuff that was going on, and as my business was, as I'm trying to figure out, all right, I don't have any money, so I can't do anything. I'm stuck here, right? And I'm working these dead end job stuff, and my dad couldn't speak at a business event one day. And it was on a topic that I knew a lot about, and this a lot of our conversations and stuff. And he said, "Hey, do you want to go do it? It was at a credit union."
Okay.
And it was like an all staff, 250 people. And I said, like 2 hours, 90 minutes, something like that. I said, okay. I was maybe all of 23 years old, maybe.
Yeah.
Something like that. Yeah. And he said, okay, go. And I went and did it. I'm pretty sure I didn't even know what a credit union was.
That's awesome.
I was like, kind of like a bank, I guess, and then I just went for it. But I was talking on personal skills. I was talking about managing emotions, focus, discipline. I was teaching E plus R equals O. And so the business context wasn't as immediately relevant, but the personal side was. And I loved it. I loved every second. I saw the humans, I saw the teams, I saw the competitive side. I'm like, wait a minute, is this business? Is this business can be this kind of fun?
Yeah.
And I went all in. My dad said,
real quick,
yeah, go ahead.
It sounds like, based on that energy that you got from that, that initial speaking event, it sounds like the event went really well. Would you say that it was,
Yeah.
People got a lot of
They
value
hired me
from
a
it?
bunch more. So
yeah, well, that's good.
That's a good reference.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. So what do you think, like, what gave you that ability to be able to stand up? You hadn't really done too much, speaking in front of people. And obviously you're teaching this type of thing. Did you have something sort of internal to you that you knew that I can do this? I can get up in front of 250 people and talk about, this topic to a company that I have no idea what the hell they even do. Right. So what do you think, was a credit to that success?
Besides youthful blind confidence, which I had in spades. Because people will ask, I mean, I joke, but it's also true. Like, I mean, I absolutely had blind confidence, right? My at that point, my confidence exceeded my competence. Now I was fortunately good enough to perform well, but looking back, I'm like, what was I thinking? What was my dad thinking even letting me go there? But here's what I had in my favor. What I had in my favor, and I was actually just posting about this on Instagram today, ironically. Number one is I knew the topic really, really well, and I cared about it a lot, which goes a long way. I love the topic of decision making and trying to, like, how do we manage our internal and external selves to go out and like show up at I love that topic. And I knew it really well, my system. But number two, more importantly, in my mind, for this question about what causes me to get up in front of an audience, because I think this question is fundamentally no different, Matt, than what gives any listener the confidence to start their own business, or to talk to their boss and say, hey, I want to build this, whatever, I'll ask for this raise, or to go into a sale or step into an environment with prospecting or pick up the phone and make cold calls. So I think these are all related. I know they are. Is I did not care what the audience thought about me.
Yep. I love it.
And I tell audiences today, right? I'm 39. I got a wife, 2 kids. I've worked on some of the biggest platforms in the world with some of the biggest names. And here's the thing, still to this day. Number one, almost everybody in the world has no idea who I am. Including a bunch of people who I would really love to know. And I would love to know who I am, and they don't know who I am. So humility is my ground base. Like, people ask me, how do you stay humble? Sort of just generally speaking, not Brian Kight, but like, how do I stay humble? And I'm like, well, how do you struggle with that? Like, just look at who you don't know. Look at what you can't do. Look at the crowds that you can't get in front of. Look at the people you can't pick up the phone and call. Look at who doesn't know who you are. You have no choice but to be humble. But then number two is this. At no point in my life have I checked with an audience for approval to make sure that I am a good person and good with myself. I've never needed that person's approval in the audience, or that person's, for me to be okay with me. So I'm not going to start today. And I'll tell audiences that point blank, and I'm fun and laugh with it. And they're all like, and they all kind of sit and they all kind of chuckle because it's kind of funny, but then they're like, damn, that's like super true. Like why, So for me to make a sales call, or me to stand up at 22, 23 in front of a credit union, I didn't know any of those people. They didn't know me. So if I got done with that and they said, that guy sucked.
What difference does it make?
I'm like, well, yesterday I didn't have their approval either. And I felt pretty good about me yesterday too. So, but I think it's this notion where people are like, oh, now I know that they think that. And so for me, those were really my 2 driving forces. And I knew and cared about the topic. And then I did not care what the audience thought about me. And so it left me free to just go up and just speak with energy and passion about what I was interested in. And then the audience can pick up whatever they want, or they can leave it sitting on the table. Like, that's not up to me. Once it leaves my mouth.
And I think so many people struggle with that too, where they can't get out of their own head. Right. They keep thinking, oh, do they like me? Am I accepted? All this and that. And I actually took an improv class years ago. And basically with an improv class, it's all just, getting out of your head, right? It's, just thinking it, or not even thinking, just, whatever your intuition is telling you to do, you just do that. And, more times than not, that's a great barometer that's going to lead you in the right direction. So after 1 semester of college in Ohio, I was really not feeling
the California to Ohio transition was hard. I was not feeling it. Had some family stuff going on. So I dropped out of college. I moved back to LA to be an actor. And I did improv, and I'd done improv before, but I did improv 4 days a week for a year straight.
Wow.
And there is no doubt in my mind that all of that was preparation. I write an email every day called Daily Discipline. And every year, every email I write goes out Monday through Friday. I've done it 4 years, never missed a day. And it ends with do the work. But every year I add a theme. So I put do the work in there because I don't want people to confuse reading my email with doing work, right? Like this is the consumption. If it stops here, you get nothing.
Yeah.
Right. You gotta go close the email and go do the work on what that topic was. Right. But I'll give a theme every year. And so the theme this whole year, every email ends with the same line. Everything is training for something. Do the work. So what it means is go back to your improv, my improv experience, and it's not limited to just those. There's so many more. Is when I'm doing improv at 18, 19 years old, I don't know that I'm doing improv to train myself how to sell.
Yeah.
I don't know that I'm doing improv to train myself how to be good on a Zoom call during a pandemic when all of my business has to go from a stage or a workshop room to a video camera. But all those countless hours at 18 and 19 years old doing improv and video and camera training was all building skills that I used in a completely different environment than the ones that I thought I was training for. But everything is training for something. We're not just in the moment that we're in. We're trying to win that moment, but that moment is also preparing us for some future moment as well. So I just always like to remember that, because there's never a moment where, oh, that wasn't worth it. Maybe not for this particular thing, because we don't win every battle, but there's something about what we just did, something about what we're doing right now that is going to have a dividend. We just gotta get to that moment.
Yeah, no, I love that. And I completely agree too. I'm a huge proponent of always, looking at what your assets are, your skill sets are, whatever it is, and then trying to, leapfrog into something that is complementary to that, rather than I'm going to go over there and I'm going to be a cake baker, right? Like, what the hell do I know about, baking cakes and decorating cakes, right? So
and for like that, like for me, like between improv and I don't know, when I was doing a lot of the video work later, it was like a decade.
Yeah.
And there was a little bit of stuff doing speaking and stuff that the improv helped out on, no doubt. But in terms of when it really started to like leverage, it was a decade later. And so, sometimes there's a decade between when we do the act that trains us and when it actually delivers a payoff. We just can't predict that. So we have to embrace that that's always going on, which is how I prefer to live.
Yeah, I love that. So talk a little bit about, you've mentioned, leadership and culture and all of that. What are some of your philosophies and your trainings on establishing, a constructive leadership team, and then obviously that's going to sort of trickle down into the culture that's going to breed and build.
Yeah. So the first is, from a business perspective, if you have a team, every team has a performance pathway, right? And the performance pathway is this: leaders create the culture that drives the behavior that produces results, right? You're an operator, you're a producer, so am I. I like to reverse engineer this, right? Our job, essentially our job in business and in sports for that matter, which I only say that because I work with a lot of sports teams, but from a business perspective, our job at its simplest is produce the behavior that produces results. Because here's why we start there. Because the products will always change.
Yeah.
The markets will always change. The audience will always change. The dynamics will always change. The processes will always change. The regulations will always change. If we build winning behavior into ourselves and our teams, then we can attach that to any product.
Whatever. Yeah.
We can pull any lever, right? We can undergo any change. We can undergo any transformation. We can do it by paper, we can do it by iPad, right? Those just happen to be next to me. That wasn't planned. Like we can do it. We can do anything when we have the behavior that produces results. The problem and the challenge is that behavior is the most complex variable in the world. Like there is nothing more complex than one person's behavior, let alone the group dynamics when we start putting 2, 5, 10, 20, 100 you know, 30,000 people together in, when businesses get really big.
Yeah.
So that's the reason we need culture. If we think of, and culture has been so poorly defined. I mean, we could do 4 hours on culture. It's just, it's gotten such an awful brand because it's been taught so terribly. It's been taught like trust falls and hugs and ping pong tables and, all this different stuff. If you think it this way, what character is to a person, culture is to a team. Character is my internal set of beliefs that I live from, that feed and guide what I do, how I do it, and why I do it. That's my character. Yeah. If I have a weak character, it means I promote something but live another way. Yep. Or I promote a really shallow belief and I live really closely to, a really shallow belief, right? That's where weak character comes from. Or weak character comes from when a little bit of pressure is applied to my character breaks. Yeah. Right? Like I believe in honesty until all of a sudden I have to tell you a truth that may hurt your feelings, but is really, really, really important. And instead of being honest because I got afraid, I just didn't tell you the truth, which means my character was it overpromised and underdelivered. Yeah. Culture is that for a team and a group. It's the set of beliefs that we share together that guide and direct how we behave on the job every day and why we actually do that, what it produces for us. And so culture is beliefs, behaviors, and outcomes. And just like every person has a character, whether they've defined it or not, everybody has a character, right? They have beliefs that they live by, and those beliefs are either strong and resilient and robust, and they uphold, and you can challenge them, but they stay under pressure. Or those beliefs at various different points have cracks and they fade or they crack or they crumble or whatever it is. Culture is the same way, right? Some cultures are, some cultures believe that, in positivity until management makes a decision they don't like. Yeah. And then they get to complain a lot. Yep. Right. It's a weak culture in that it only takes a little bit of pressure or challenge or difficulty for it to crack. And this is important because, and this is one of the really big things in culture for people to get when you think about this pathway. And again, it's not because of the pathway exists because this is true. There is nothing that drives human behavior in a business more strongly than culture. Culture is the number one execution vehicle in the world. Because think about your own experience. Do most people in their jobs, whether it's entrepreneurs or not, do most people in their jobs behave in a way that maximizes their career, their finances, their growth, and their ability to bring in more revenue? Is that how most people behave on the job? No, it's not. No. It's definitely how some people behave. Yeah. But it does not explain work behavior. Yeah. So if we're not behaving according to the thing that makes us the most money, advances our career, makes us the best for customers or within the internal, helps us work with our teammates to grow and advance, if it doesn't grow the business, right? So that we're increasing the stability of the entity that employs us, its stock price, if that's a thing. If that's not driving our behavior, what is? What's driving our behavior is whether or not I am socially accepted by the people that I work with. Yeah, that makes sense. And that's culture. Yep. Because then what happens is then you see infighting, you see self-preservation at the expense of the actual product, right? You see somebody who's in a sales role who just doesn't try that hard. Yeah. Because they're like, eh. And so, you see sports teams are really easy to see because you can visualize it, right? You can watch a sports team that just gives up and quits on a game. If you're saying, well, are they bad athletes? No. Are they bad people? No. Are they, do they have awful characters? No. But what happens is once I'm surrounded by people who have a little negative energy, it's way easier for me to adopt that negative energy than it is for me to be the isolated one, a little bit rejected by the group, trying to push positivity because that feels awkward for most people. So businesses that try to build culture by putting it on the outside, right? Putting culture into their floor plans and all these other places everybody tries to put culture. They build these cultures of trying to make everybody feel good. Yeah. And that doesn't work because it's the things that produce don't always feel good. Yeah. That makes sense. Being honest with each other. Yeah. That can be tough sometimes. Yeah. If our culture is built on feel good, then guess what? I'm going to back down from those really important moments that don't feel that good, but are also really high character, high integrity, and productive, I'm going to lose them.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then where's culture come from? It comes from leaders. Leaders have
Yeah.
to create it. They got to design it. They got to build it by discipline. They got to uphold the standards. They got to support people. They got to teach them. They got to build relationships so that we're building culture, not just based on protocols and compliance. We're building culture how it really needs to be built. And that is conversation to conversation, heart to heart, right? Like, challenge to challenge.
Mm-hmm.
And it's leaders who are responsible for instigating and pushing and getting that ball rolling. And then everybody has a role in culture, but it's leaders who have to get that moving and going. They got to be the spark. And ultimately they have to actually define it and then do the process of keeping and holding everybody's alignment as they go forward. So that's really the hierarchy. Leaders create culture. Culture drives behavior. Behavior produces results. If in your business, if you can get that pathway right, and then most importantly, if you can keep it going, which is, in my opinion, the way harder thing, not getting it going, but keeping it going. If you can get that right, you will be able to endure and even thrive through any changing business environment, business model, context, pandemic, whatever. You're going to be fine. And then when the conditions are right, you are going to excel while everybody else crashes.
Yeah. So you've made me think of a couple of different things. So this, just a few weeks ago, we interviewed another person who, I'm huge on core values, right? And I assume that, part of establishing the culture is defining those core values. Like you just said, the leaders need to define, that culture, what that means, right? So we defined all of our core values, and our core values are all, one word things, and then a definition behind them, right?
Sure.
I talked to someone a while ago on the show, and his core values, I noticed right away, were very action based. They it was a couple of words, but it was some type of an action. And like you're sort of saying, you're teaching behaviors, and behavior is really what you're trying to get across, which is very much so action based. Do you feel like creating the behaviors or creating that culture that you're talking about should be more wrapped around an actionable core value rather than having, sort of one word that, maybe with a sentence after it to be able to define it? But do you think it's more powerful having an action-based type, guiding mechanism, if you will?
Yeah. So all of this is, anytime we're in this topic, I mean, obviously this is like, you're asking a question that is at like the core,
right,
where like the majority of my work with, teams and businesses is. I mean, it's a great question, but I want to take just one step back from the question, and just to make sure from a methodology perspective, we're all on the same page. I want to make sure that whether it's core values, I say beliefs rather than core values, they're synonymous. So, listen to the phrase that you like best. The methodology is not going to be the answer. And this is, again, this is important, right? It's like buying an app. Downloading a different to-do app is not that's not the answer, and it's not your problem.
Okay. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
For not you personally, right? Anybody, it's not the to-do app. And so it's not the methodology. Now, at times, methodologies can help us understand things and uncover things and organize them. So I'm a really big believer in systems, because I think once we've got the right spot, get in the right system, and we get to a good place. So here's how I put the system together. And this is before I'll do this. I'll talk about the system, and then I'll talk about the reason why, and let you ask some questions. So the system is this. We help businesses and teams build what we call a culture playbook. Okay. And it's what you would think it is, right? It is a playbook for what our culture is and how to live it and why it matters. Okay. Just like anything else, if we have a playbook, it doesn't explain every detail. It's not exhaustive, but it is explicit. This is how we want to organize ourselves, what we want to do. The main component of the playbook is something called a BBO, and it stands for beliefs, behaviors, and outcomes. Okay. And so we define, what do we believe? What does that look like in behavior? What outcomes does that produce for us? Here's why we structure it that way. Take a step back from business for a second. And again, core value, belief, synonymous. What's the purpose of a belief? What's the purpose of a core value?
Yeah, I guess it's a guiding beacon of, this is the direction that we should go when faced in, different situations. Or
yeah. And is it, generally speaking, is it designed to be generally when you feel like it, try to think about doing this? Or with the word core value belief, is it
it should be, like you said, something that, is sort of internal. This is what, this is what drives me, right?
Yeah.
This is what is important to me.
So here's the question. What is a belief worth if it doesn't produce a behavior?
Yeah. That's true.
The entire purpose for holding a belief is to create a behavior from it.
Yeah. Yep.
So in other words, if we hold beliefs that don't create real behaviors, what do we have? Mm-hmm. We have an empty shell. We have actually something worse, in my observation. We have something worse than having no belief. We actually have the, weird way to say it, but true. We have the belief that we have a real belief when in fact we don't. This is what people mean by virtue signaling these days, is you throw the claim of the belief up, but there is no backing of behavior. So the first is, if we're going to define a belief or a core value, which I'm a huge fan of, whether it's one word or phrase, I'm agnostic, it's whatever. We have to define what it looks like in action for the purpose of holding ourselves responsible for doing it.
Yeah.
So that we do not ever, 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 under any circumstances, end up in the crowd of people who claim they believe in things without doing them and paying a price for them.
Yeah.
So my whole thing is, if you say you believe in honesty, I'm with you. It's good. But do you believe in honesty, or do you believe in selective honesty? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Huge difference. Do you believe in empathy, or do you believe in empathy with people you politically agree with?
Yeah.
Difference. The difference between somebody who believes in empathy, they live by it. And they live by it whether people agree or disagree, whether they look like them or don't, whether they're treating them well or not treating them real great. Somebody who believes in empathy, they live with empathy. Somebody who believes in empathy, as long as you look like me, vote like me, use kind words to me, as long as you don't say something mean first, that's a super different set of behaviors, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And then the last piece is, so a belief needs to produce a behavior. And then the next connection is, what's a behavior designed to do? What's the purpose of a behavior? It's to produce a result. I engage in this behavior because I believe it will create
this result.
Result.
Yeah.
And so when we build this out, what I find to be very helpful for people, in part because of how poorly culture has been done before, 30 years ago, even frankly, when I was starting this 15 years ago, 18 years ago, sort of the culture was still this really kind of new thing that people was being talked about. And so all of this stuff was flooding and they were pushing all these different stuff. But if you look today, and again, I'm in a lot of these, but if you look at Fortune 500 businesses or big companies, and then now pulling down to entrepreneurial companies because they're all following the trends, is you're going to see lists of so many of the same core values that exist in all these other businesses.
Yeah. Yeah.
And what happens is you have this phrase that no longer has real meaning.
True. Yeah.
It's kind of empty. And, you see this in the sports world where these cliches start rolling around. And in today's athlete, who, just like today's business person, has consumed so much content and seen so much on social media and YouTube and books, that by the time they get into our businesses, by the time they get onto our teams and they see integrity, respect, collaboration, diversity, the process, whatever it is, they're like, okay, well, this is the 7th company that I've worked for that has said we're built on integrity, and they're fundamentally no different than all the other businesses that I've been in.
Yeah.
Right. So they all say it, but does it really explain who they actually are? Debatable to not really. So I'm just a big fan of being explicit about the belief, explicit about the behavior that needs to be there if that belief is real. It's the testing point in my mind. The behavior is a testing point. It's the pass fail, yes, no, succeed or not.
Yep.
And then what's the reason? What's the business outcome and purpose behind that behavior? That's the reason that we believe in this so damn deeply.
Yeah. Do you typically find people will change their core values, beliefs, what have you? If they go through and say, this is us, and then they, go through and test it, and maybe it isn't a good fit. Maybe it's something that, keeps, coming up where, that's always a challenge or that's always a problem. Do you often see people will change things and adjust things sort of as they go?
I probably see more people who need to, but aren't.
Yeah.
And people who do. I mean, it's one of those things where people get nervous and weird about, they think it's this fixed component in quality. And of course, I don't know, it's like anything else. If you're changing it once a year, probably not the best strategy. But at the same time, if it's, this process is sticky and it's messy and it's hard. Like it's so much harder to uncover our core beliefs, our driving beliefs, our core values, the stuff that really, like, I ask myself this question: what am I willing to pay almost any price for?
Mm-hmm.
Like, again, for my own personal beliefs. And then I'll ask the same thing for the business. What am I willing to pay almost any price for? So with me, one of the things I do, and you can probably sense this, is I believe in the truth with love.
Okay.
So one of the things that drives me is, and this is a belief behavior. It's kind of like, it's sometimes they're in between. They're like, is it entirely this? For me, it's a behavior. But I also believe in telling the truth with love. But one of my marks for my standards, culturally and character-wise for me both, it's actually an intersection, is tell the truth with love.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so because of that, when there's a really hard, uncomfortable truth that I have to say in front of a business crowd that other people are afraid to say because of cancel culture, or maybe I won't get rehired by this client or whatever, I believe I have a responsibility to say that.
Yeah. I like
that. But it has to be with love. It has to come from love. But my love can't cause me to be a coward in the moment and not say the real actual thing that needs to be said. And I don't mean coward, again, in a really critical way. I mean, like my fear got better of me, and rather than do the thing that was scary, I did the less scary thing. I want to do both of those. And what happens is there's a price for that. I'll get done with a keynote and there will be people who are like, man, don't like that guy.
Yeah.
That's the price.
Right.
But I feel like that price is worth it compared to what the price I would pay if I did the opposite.
Yeah.
Right.
Absolutely.
So I'm deciding who I want to be and what I'm willing to pay for, and then go live that. I don't want to find myself in the moment thinking I believe something, encounter the need to go live it, and then find out that I'm not really willing to pay the price of that belief, and then not live it out in full because the price was too heavy.
Yeah,
I don't want to be that person.
Yeah, no, I love that. And like you said, you don't want to live in a shell, under a shell that doesn't mean anything, right?
No, we have enough. I mean, look, we have enough people who talk about, I mean, it's always been this way. Mm-hmm. It's just we live in this media environment where stuff gets pushed out so much. So this isn't new, first of all. But we've got enough people who say they're about something, and then they get in certain crowds and they get in certain moments and they're not really about it.
Yeah.
We've got enough of that, right? We've got enough people who say, again, let's talk leadership, right? They believe in accountability until they're the ones being held accountable.
Yeah.
They believe young people are way too entitled, but they believe that at 50 years old, they shouldn't have to change in their business.
Yeah. That's true. I like that.
No.
Yeah.
If say like, if you have the standard, the belief,
the
first person to pay a price for it has got to be you. Otherwise, just own the fact that you don't really believe that. I believe in entitlement. I don't believe you get to be entitled, but I do believe I get to be entitled, because Matt, that's what integrity is. Mm-hmm. Integrity is being complete and whole in your belief system. I'm just asking people to be integrity. That's it. Just live with integrity. We're good to go.
I love it. Brian, we could go on and on, I'm sure, with all these different topics, but if people want to learn more about you, your programs, what would be the best way to get in touch or learn more?
Yeah. So my social handle everywhere, YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, all those spots, at @TBrianKight. Last name is Kight. Looks like night, but sounds like kite, like the kind that you fly. And then from a business perspective, all the business side, all the business tools are at my website, tbriankight.com. And then all my personal tools, all the tools that I do for individuals, the personal discipline side, that's at dailydiscipline.com. And I send a free email out every morning at 6 a.m. Eastern time. And it's just about the length of a phone. Teaches some aspect of personal discipline applied to, the areas, skills, relationships, applications in our lives that make a difference. And it was all born out of getting done with a session, a keynote or a workshop or something, working with a client, and people saying, how do I keep this alive? Like, this is why you're here. This is, going on. This is great, but how do I keep it alive? And they didn't like my answer when I said, you wake up tomorrow and you do it. They didn't like that answer. So to steal their excuses and for me to share more of just my own thoughts and notes with people, I said, okay, well, like I'll help everybody on for free on the journey who wants something to keep them sharp daily, focused, but doesn't want to have to consume a ton. I'll send out like one really focused and specific message on a skill around discipline, so that from now on, there is no excuse. There is no reason for it not being on your mind, because it's sitting right there in your inbox. It'll take you 30 seconds to read it. And if you're not going to put in 30 seconds, you were never going to do any of that work.
Yeah. That's a great way to look at it. And do you find often that people do have a hard time, continuing? Like you said, this is really, really difficult. Any parting words on tips to be able to keep that fire going, day in, day out?
So, I mean, I don't know that this is going to be new for a lot of people, but man, do I mean this in the most simple and obvious way. And it might be for some people. You don't need to be disciplined every day. You just have to be disciplined today.
I like that.
Like that's like everybody gets worried about you can't do tomorrow's work today.
Yeah.
Like the best way to be disciplined every day is to be just disciplined for
today.
one day. And then we get to go to sleep. We get to rest.
Yeah.
And then tomorrow we'll wake up and say, all right, do I want to be disciplined today? But let's wait till that decision gets there. For now, if I can be disciplined today, I can do that any day of my life.
Yeah. I love it. Brian, this has been fun. This has been a lot of fun. And like I said, there's so many different paths and angles and all of that we can go down. So maybe sometime in the future, we'll do another show and tackle some more of these topics.
Yeah, we'd love that. It's
really,
been a blast. I appreciate having me on.
Really, really good stuff. I appreciate it.
Of course.